at the top so that we can see who attended. So, just to get started, this document, this brainstorm, is a chance for you to share your notes. So as we go into breakout groups, which we were thinking of 2 breakout groups, feel free to continue to have someone maybe note take and capture the conversation. And we have Porter here, one of my Texas Immersive students. She is going to try being the graphical note taker. So by the end and after this, we're going to try doing a visual graphic of what mental models and XR is, so that we can include it in our report that we're giving to the VP of Research at the end of this year. We're trying to get a bigger picture or an overall idea of who's interested in extended reality here across UT's campus, what your research and application interest is, and how we can actually start looking after larger funds to support multiple labs and multiple research agendas or projects. So we've broken the rest of this semester into 3 workshops based on our lunch and learns last semester. And the 3 workshops are starting with mental models, and then we're going to do story tech, and then we're going to end in end of April with, what are we ending with?
Share.
With share, which is science, health, environmental risks. So this is things that people have shared with us, are kind of core areas of research interest from faculty here on campus. So let's get started. Maybe we could go around I don't want to take a lot of time because I want to jump into the conversation. So I'm not going to be like, let's go around and everyone introduce themselves, only because that takes a long time and we have less than an hour. So maybe within your groups, you could do that. We have 2 breakout groups, and Paul thought it would be good to break into how XR can affect the mind, and another group on learn how the mind works using XR. So we could talk about that a little bit just to make sure those are the 2 breakout groups we want. Or if you're comfortable with those 2 sections and you know which one you would want to go to, we can immediately jump into breakout groups so we can get to know each other and share. Which would y'all prefer? Anyone?
This is just like my classes. This is amazing. You think we talk about, hey, the students are not really talking, and then you go in there, wow, looks like it's a phenomena.
I'm telling you. Go ahead.
I have to confess to being a little sort of ignorant here. And I wondered if you could spell these questions out a bit. I just use VR as an environment where I can ask, do experiments, and so Mary, how can XR affect the mind? What would that mean?
So for instance, Jasper Smits is way more interested in how to use XR to, extinguish phobias and anxiety.
Okay,
and all that. That's how he's using XR.
I actually have a student doing something like that. It's all right. Okay, got it.
And then whereas you are doing something that's trying to explore how the mind works, basically using XR as an environment.
Okay, got it. All right. I actually have a clinical student working in my lab looking at social anxiety and trying to do a retraining for him. So yeah, I'm interested in both those things.
You're in both those things.
Okay.
I think Zoltan is more interested in how to learn about how the mind works using XR.
Okay.
And then somebody like Lucas would be much more interested about how you can use XR to help people learn.
Yeah, I'm interested in that area too. Like coming from the digital media and learning background, like learning how retention and engagement works better.
Okay, I got it. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Good question.
No, it's a good question. And someone added an 11th question, what features are missing? Who wrote that? Zoltan.
Yeah, that was me. I was just, it's mostly overlapping with other questions, but I'm still interested in the technological barriers that separates us from a completely deceptive reality simulation.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would want to add that XR, which is an umbrella term for extended reality, is not just VR, you know, that it includes augmented reality, mixed reality. I think that it's driven by AI and IoT, in my opinion. A lot of the projects I work with incorporate those in one way or another. And I agree with you, Zoltan, that I think AR and mixed reality is so much more interesting for blending the physical and digital, you know, and not completely making it a simulation and wondering if the changes happen.
And I think potentially much more powerful as a device for, you know, understanding I would say the brain as opposed to the mind. But that's the way I tend to think about it. But yeah, no, I think I actually haven't used mixed reality, but I think it's potentially terrifically powerful.
Yeah. Well, we have some labs here that have this type of technology, and I know in my lab at the Imagine Lab, we have 4 different mixed reality headsets that you should definitely come over and try.
Okay, I mean, neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not a lot of unfortunately augmented reality research being performed, and I think that's an area where we can definitely use more research, because I think that's going to be even, as Erin said, bigger
Yes.
than VR is. But yet we don't seem to have a lot of research in that area, and usually what often happens is that we, after it becomes big, UT goes, wow, we should really look into this.
Well,
whether we could catch the wave beforehand instead of afterwards.
well, I don't know if Lucy's going to tout her own horn, but she is doing research in augmented reality with skin cancer awareness.
Mitch Pryor in robotics got whatever Army Futures Command's version of the HoloLens is. There was some military version of that device that's being distributed. So there are a couple of robotics groups that are rendering information on tops of robots with HoloLens.
And I think there's definitely overlap between what we're trying to do and robotics, because, you know, it's a matter of perception and all that.
Are there other overarching questions or clarifications, or do you think it would be a good idea to break into 2 groups?
I mean, the one that I'm most invested in is how can XR be used as a research tool? But, you know, I've been pretty specific in the scope of what I've been looking at. Actually, I got my VR system after a conversation with Mary, which she might remember. Like last year, a year and a half ago, we were talking about eye trackers and integrated eye tracking, and you suggested getting a Vive. I got a Vive Pro eye system wireless kit, and that's I've been using that in eye tracking studies. I actually just published a paper using that system.
Now it's at the oh, what's the eye tracker that's in?
It's got a Tobii Eye integrated.
Okay.
Yeah.
I might talk to you later, because we had trouble getting out Tobii to work.
Oh, we got it working. Well, I'll tell you all about it.
Perfect. I'll get my student to talk to you then.
Awesome.
So do we want to break up it into 2 different groups, or do we want to go the questions as a whole group, or do we want to, how would you guys like to proceed?
I'd love to do it as a whole group. I'd love to hear what everyone has to say. And I think we're small enough that it would work.
Yeah, I feel a little lost myself too, and having not been at any of these meetings, and so I'm anxious to hear, you know, find out what people are doing and stuff. So
I agree.
Great.
We are not that many. Yeah.
Great, let's do it. Let's do it. Should we start with the questions in the overall group and we kind of just drill down on them a little bit from everybody? And maybe since we didn't do introductions, just if you speak, just let people know a little bit about your background, so and we can capture that a little bit as we go along. Sound good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So who came up with this question? I guess I should have kept the names, Paul. Sorry about that.
How does XR affect the mental models during the initial onboarding of the technology?
Oh, that
Oh,
was Jion.
Yes.
I don't think she's here.
No.
How does XR?
I guess that what that means is people have to adjust when they, particularly when they're doing VR, have to adjust the fact they've entered into a new reality. And how does the mind adjust to that new reality?
Can I just say something here that it seems to me that the critical thing is to make sure you have a geometric match between your environment and the real world. And if that's the case, there isn't any adjustment as far as I can tell. I mean, you know, as a psychologist, it's very critical to make sure that it's calibrated to real space, so that 10 centimeters in the VR or the extended reality is equal to 10 centimeters in the real world, because your body very, very well. And if your height, let's suppose the height is a little bit wrong, you feel like you're floating on air, right? And so exactly where you should be in space because of the way that the visual image changes as you move through it. So I would say a goal should be to make sure that you don't have to adjust, right? And
Right.
that you don't, because as soon as you make the point, we're it's really smart and sneaky.
Talking to them about VR headsets. We're talking about how people like TR headsets.
Yeah, or I think it's actually about a lot of the experiences that I play with. They have some sort of training at the beginning, So even when you first get your Oculus Quest, they have lots of different games that you can play for you to learn the mechanics of how your controllers work or how you understand 3D space. But I remember talking with Jessica Lindell, who's the head of learning for Unity, and she specifically talked about that from an education standpoint, we need more understanding of 3D space. Like we don't teach about 3D space in our different domains. And I think that's important to think about.
Well,
go ahead.
No, I understanding controls, I agree, but and there's some unavoidable problems, at least in VR, where you misperceive depth a little bit, but it shouldn't be. I think the really incredibly impressive thing about VR is that it feels so natural, and that it just feels like this is, the brain, as long as you make the geometry correct so that when you move, you get exactly the right feedback, then there really shouldn't be much adjustment.
If I can say something, yeah, my name is Oltan Nadazdi. I do research with intracranial recording from human brain with virtual reality systems. So I totally agree with Mary that calibration is fundamental between the two, the real environment and the virtual environment. However, this is only true for augmented and extended reality applications, because for virtual reality, you are basically completely replacing your real environment, with a new environment. And one fascinating aspect of that is what I've been noticing working with patients, as well as I look at kids, how easily they get accustomed with these systems, is that the ease and smoothness of how they switch between real world as well as, let's say, a game on the computer screen. So, they can be sitting on a bus and playing on their Game Boys. Now, there is a reality that the bus is going, from one station to another with certain motion. And at the same time, this kid is playing a video game in a completely different geometry, in a completely different virtual space, with completely different perspectives and everything. And these two realities don't collide. So on one hand, I agree with VR, we need to calibrate it, sorry, with extended reality or augmented, we need to calibrate precisely what we place there in the world.
Yeah.
But for the VR, you don't. And that's actually the amazing thing, that the brain seamlessly adjusts to the new world and bouncing back to the reality. I can take my headset off and continue my conversation with my family and put it back, and I'm completely teleported, I can use that word, to a completely different reality with different physics and everything.
Well, there are different, there are different situations. So one is like, I always have my people walking around, right? Because I wanted to match exactly. I mean, you're absolutely right. You can adjust to something where there isn't a one-to-one mapping between, your body movement and the space in the VR space. And I think that's because I think of so for example, we use, when people walk through space, you get the optic flow information and you integrate that and do the sort of path integration. So you can make inferences about, if I were getting this pattern, I would be moving this far. And so, yes, you do have to have some representation, mental representation, which is consistent with as if you were sort of being transported. And I think we're kind of very good at this because, you sort of feel almost like a ghost sometimes floating through the space. So yeah, we're good at that. But I think that those are the situations where people, can get a little sick because you've got a visual vestibular conflict, and so I always try to avoid that like the plague. But yeah, I think we do map the visual experience onto what it would be if you were walking through this room. This is what it would be like.
So it sounds like to me that if one is moving through space, particularly if one is moving through space as in walking, then precision is required.
Yes.
But if one is like person sitting down and using VR and just doing something with their hands perhaps, and then it's pretty easy to switch between realities.
That is absolutely true. And like if you're doing like fMRI experiments or something like that, where you have to have a stationary observer, that's what you have to do. But there will be things different in the brain, so you do process the information differently. If you're not moving, there are effects of not moving versus actually moving. So the fMRI, it'd be interesting to know how the fMRI, a lot of experiments using fMRI have people, navigating through spaces with a little joystick and things. And we don't actually know what is going to be different in the brain.
Do you feel like, I'm hearing y'all talk and I wonder if there's analogy here with like language learners that are bilingual or trilingual, it's called code switching, so I'm hearing y'all talking. I'm a very avid user. Maybe some of y'all are as well with mixed reality. So I think I code switch pretty easily when it comes to going from a mixed reality headset to using augmented reality headset to whatever, you know. But do you feel like from what you're saying, some people take longer, or there needs to be some sort of basic understanding? And I think that's what Gian is getting to is how do we get people to learn to code switch?
I think actually we're all pretty good at it. Like I think
I don't know. I've seen a lot of my students come to my lab and try on the mixed reality headsets, and there's a huge fear. That's the one thing I've seen a lot of is there's a huge fear of putting it on if they've never had one before.
Well, people may, I think they might have heard a lot about, you know, motion sickness and things. Yeah, I don't know why they're,
Motion sickness, I think, is being taken. I think that we're getting better and better at the design and development of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that two things have kind of gotten rid of motion sickness. One is the tracking has gotten really good.
Yeah.
And the second is the resolution is way up. So if you have like a current gen headset, this like at least 1080p per eye, and there are 4K headsets in each eye now. I mean, they're expensive. It's like a $5,000 or $6,000 headset, but you know, if we're using like lighthouse tracking, maybe the inside out tracking, you know, you're probably not going to experience a lot of nausea unless you're doing something that's like crazy disconnected from your physical reality. Like if you're loading that stupid roller coaster game, I mean, it's not stupid, but if you're loading that roller coaster that they used to distribute with the Oculus Rift, which you can get on Steam, that will make you sick, you know, or that makes me sick. But just about anything else, if you're walking around in space regularly, it tends to be pretty okay.
That's why I like walking, because that avoids the visual vestibular conflict. And
yeah, I agree with that.
I get sick in IMAX movies when those jellyfish start looming.
Mary, have you done a study where you're wearing the VR and you're walking in the VR space, and all of a sudden you take off the VR and you have to continue walking and put it back on again and continue walking and see what happens in the transition between the two?
I haven't done that, but in my ideal world, it would be no difference.
There should, yeah, but I think at this point, I think it'd be jarring for the participant.
It would be nice to try that, but yeah.
I just want to remind ourselves that this question is actually not as new as we think. You know, it's not as new as VR, AR. If we go back to 19th century, early like German psychophysicists used that mirror in front of Mary, and many of you probably heard about this, that could completely reverse the visual input from upside down. And it takes about a day to completely adapt to the inverse, and the brain actually inverts the image. So next day you're looking through this mirror display and you see everything normally. And it takes another day when you take it off to readjust to the real world. So
yeah,
there's remarkable flexibility. And just to enhance your point, if you need to be active in the environment and moving to accelerate the adjustment.
Yes, we can adjust very quickly. I used to do an undergraduate lab with that, where I would displace the world by, I'd rotate the world by, 20 degrees, and people are just really.
Yeah, the prism glasses.
I don't know if have you read the book Mirror Worlds? Because this is something that my past mentors made us read when we're doing early days virtual world. I think it came out in the 70s, and it was actually a reflection of how we think about taking all of these type of spaces and then putting them into simulations. Or it ties, I think, to what you're talking about, Sultan.
All right, should we move on? All right, so what's the next question?
Well, maybe Justin had said he really wanted to dive into his question. What question was that, Justin? Oh, how can
I mean,
XR be a
I'm hoping
research?
that other people are using VR systems in similar ways. I think Mary is, where it's like I've used it for integrated body and gaze tracking. So I work in the robotics domain, or I'm the assistant director of Texas Robotics, and the problem that I've really been working on with my VR system is social navigation. So in robotics, this is people and robots navigating through a shared space. And so we want to look at models of how people, get out of each other's ways. A lot of the models are just based on tracks of the people, but I've been looking at the exchange of body language and gaze. And so I've been building body tracking models. Right now, my big effort is tracking whole body tracks, which is a pretty cheap add-on if you have like a Vive system, and gaze tracks, and looking at predictive models of where you're going to walk based on where you're looking. But then, so that already works, and that's already published. And now I'm looking at putting two people into this environment, looking at the exchange of body language and gaze. And my plan is to train up deep neural networks and build planners, which go onto robots, so robots can produce these cues, and then go through, shared spaces with people and either produce them or interpret them based on people's language. So, the broad question there is sort of how can we use, augmented reality as a research tool to answer these questions. How do people behave? Going to put them into some virtual environment and get comprehensive recordings of their, social behaviors in order to, analyze those and build models of those and deploy those, or integrate those with machine learning and deploy those.
Mhm. Has anyone else used any of these tools for research?
I would definitely like to hear more about this, Justin. So maybe is your paper on your webpage?
It was just accepted, and we're preparing the camera ready today. But I can send you a copy.
I'd love to see that. Yeah. Thanks.
Awesome.
I'm fascinated by this. I'm wondering, you ever think about doing a workshop or anything to teach people like how you're using some of these tools for, gaze and motion or body language? Because I think there's interest in here, but I think there's a lack of understanding of how to use those tools.
I mean, I could put together a couple quick slides or something. I mean, honestly, like we're so right now I'm recruiting PhD students who are interested in this. Right now, it's mostly staffed by my undergraduates. So we've got, this much done but I have a pretty comprehensive plan. I could put together. I actually, I already have slides on this. So if we wanted to get together, and I could show the slides from the PhD recruitment talk that I gave this year, to kind of explain what the plot is, I could do that.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, and it's not tooled as like a tool talk, but I could add a few slides to explain what the pieces are that are enabling us to do this. The underlying assumption in the talk is that you either kind of already understand the tools or don't care, and in the case of, PhD recruitment this year, I was recruiting people who are interested in deep learning for the most part to build the layers on the top. So the assumption was they don't care, but I could add 5 or 6 slides that explain what the guts of all these things are. Yeah, totally.
Erin, can I just make one little clear statement about the adaptation thing?
Yeah.
So I think what it rests on is the fact that the sensory motor mapping in the brain is very flexible. And so it's like you're constantly monitoring the feedback you get as a consequence of movements. Now, they're and basically tweaking the system because movement control is complicated. And what that means, though, is there will be a range for where you can adapt easily, and then there'll be outside that range, it's going to be harder to adapt. So there is a literature which explains this adaptation process, which I would love to see that. Okay, I can go into that. maybe I'll email you.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Oh, on that topic, one thing that I'd be really interested in doing, which is probably more of an augmented reality thing than a VR thing, because I think in VR you would kind of wax any kind of measurable effects, but you could recreate the rubber hand illusion using an XR system, right? And I think in VR, if you scale yourself up, that like that kind of loses all of its tie to the real world. But if you were rendering something on top of your real arm, or blowing away the perception of your real arm in space, and making it longer, you could probably also change the perceptions of sizes of objects and things like that, just like in the original experiment. That would be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I feel like USC's ICT group actually did something similar, where they, for people in war who had lost a limb, they actually put them in VR experiments for them to feel like that ghost arm that they had lost, that they see it again, to help them mentally, get over the loss of their spaces. I could find that one. I wonder if it was Skip Rizzo might have done that one.
And that's supposed to be a treatment, I think, for phantom limb.
Phantom limbs, yes.
Yeah.
So another thing I wanted to mention that Erin and I discussed the other day was like, I've got my students engineering these scenarios where we're doing things like making predictions of where you're about to walk based on where you're gazing, which is pretty pretty widely sort of hypothesized that we could use this in robotics. Difficult to make the actual measurements, which is what makes the VR platform so good for this. But one factor there is that then we were looking at the more general hypotheses of motion regarding, like, do you forecast your motion? Do you do you start with a gaze and a head twist and shoulder twists and hips? Do you kind of socially over exaggerate your motions so they're more legible to other people who are looking at you, or is everything sort of as efficient as possible? These are things that have been looked at in robotics stemming from the field of animation, but people who are trying to apply animation principles to the design of robots. And of course, like, if people don't do this, then this assumption isn't super valid on the other side, which is interpreting body language and motion, and may not make sense in long-term deployments. Like, just because something works in a laboratory or in a theme park or something like that doesn't mean it's gonna work if you scale it to 100 robots walking down Speedway, right? And which is pretty much, not 100 robots, because that'd be millions of dollars, but like 10 robots, which is still millions of dollars, going down Speedway is kind of our target. I had a point and then I lost it. Oh, the point being that I've got my undergraduates who are setting up experiments which will yield the data that they need in order to compute the statistical models that they're shooting for. But sometimes they're not super, one, enthusiastic about making an environment that looks good, or two, the task is very synthetic. So one thing that I'm interested in doing that might have some overlap with people in the group is taking a piece of software that we've developed to extract the data that we care about, but embedding it in some other task, which is less inorganic, right? So that we're getting, real motion rather than, say, the person's turning their head rapidly to orient their body towards the ball that pops up into space, which is literally the experiment that my undergraduates came up with, which is like, ball explodes into existence and you turn towards it and you do that 50 times. And now we have the data we need for our recording, but probably you're not moving in a fashion that's reflective of how people actually move anymore, right? Now you're probably making a motion which is sort of scripted to make the ball disappear and get you through the experiment. And so, I was like, could we embed this in something like, a mystery game, and you're a detective and you're looking for objects, right? And if we can get the start of your head twist, then we can measure what we want, and it's embedded in a context where you're probably still moving in an organic fashion, which gives us something that looks real, rather than something that will probably make all of our statistics pan out and yet is so synthetic that those statistics don't mean anything anymore. So that's another thing we've been kind of looking at.
I want to move on to, because this because I think the second question here, which we're not going to get through these questions, is sort of how does XR affect people's attitudes and beliefs? And I guess you can throw in learning with that. You know, how do we do research in that area?
Well, I think it actually ties directly to what Justin was just sharing, because when we were talking and he was saying I could put something on one of your games or one of your experiences that you're developing, which that's what we do. And I know, Paul, that's what you do too. Mm-hmm. We've got, you know, Eyes on the Sky right now that we're developing. That's a real wicked problem on getting people to understand space environmentalism, which is invisible because it's near Earth space. It's not grounded or something here. So I could really see, and it's built like an escape room game. So I could really see, you know, getting to interest in like, can we change people's attitudes? Can we change their behavior on like paying attention to what they're doing here on Earth in order to change long-term our future of near Earth space by working with Justin and putting one of his, like, what do we look at, or what objects that we're putting in the story apply to understanding perception, understanding attitudes.
I'm gonna have to leave to teach, but just in terms of there's one thing that there's a clinical student in my lab doing. He's actually, it's not terribly satisfactory, but I'll just tell you what it is, and maybe people can suggest better ways to do that. So he's looking at social anxiety, and he has people giving a speech, and he's got a 3D video because he wants to control the behavior of the audience. You know, some people will look away and use their phone and stuff, and so he, in order to have reproducibility, he's got this 3D video, but you've got the person in the VR looking at the 3D video, and so it's not the video that won't it'll respond to rotations, but if you translate your head, you're now in the wrong space. You know, you sort of messed it up. But anyway, he's been actually trying to get people to look at the audience members in order to sort of help train them out of the social anxiety. But at some point it might be useful. This is not something, I'm not a clinical person, so, but I do want to promote the use of, you know, XR for these applications. So at some point it might be useful to get some feedback from people about how to do that better without having actual real people, you know. So avatars are not much fun, you know, you don't want avatars. So it just seems like it's a technical problem.
Are you saying avatars when we embody the avatars, or avatars like NPCs?
Well, so what I'm saying is he's got somebody giving a talk to a video of real people. He had actors, right?
Yeah.
And the advantage of that is that when you get another subject, they're looking at exactly the same video. So if you want to say, when somebody takes out their phone, does that make you look away? Or when the person sort of turns their head away, these are some of the social cues, you know. So, but if you had actually, if the person was a real person talking to a real audience, you can't make it identical for every trial, right?
Yeah.
So that's why it has a video, but I think it has disadvantages because you can't get a 3D video, you can't get the translations in there unless, you know, the alternative is not to have a real audience, but avatars as an audience.
Yeah.
And I think people don't take them all that seriously, right? Unless avatars have got very good these days. But.
Oh, they have. I'm like, I'm like super obsessed with Lucy, who's a virtual being, and she's 8 years old. And she actually spoke on a live panel with real people at South by Southwest last week.
Oh, so maybe maybe avatars are possible. Okay.
Yeah, I think we need to put her off with avatars.
Yeah.
I should find out about that then. I'll tell Mikhail. I'll get him to email you.
Yeah.
find out.
Virtual beings, man, that's the future. I'm so excited about them.
All right. Okay, good. Yeah, well, I'm sort of pretty much behind the times. So I better go, guys. It's been very interesting, and I would be happy to, join future discussions. So I found out a lot of things I should have already known. So
thank you. Thanks for your participation.
Bye, Mary.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Who else has comments, thoughts, want to hop on a question? Because we have about 10 minutes, so I want to make sure everyone has a chance to share their ideas.
Hey guys, I know I hopped on late. Apologies.
All right.
We're running a robot clinic over here. Justin, my daughter might want to talk to you about the little robotic future.
Absolutely.
She says she's going to be a wrestler when she grows up, though. It's a toss-up. Okay.
I was a wrestler too, so go for it.
Hey, well, maybe so hello, greetings. And what I wanted to talk about a bit is a topic Erin and I have been talking about, is a grant that I got a demanding captain here, is a grant that we scored at the medical school with some students who run a clinic for homeless patients right around the 6th and Trinity area called C.D. Doyle. And there are undergraduate UT students who volunteer at the clinic, as well as medical school students who intake patients, do patient interviews, and also patient handoffs. After they conduct an interview, can they hand the patient off to a resident and present the presenting claim. So what we decided to do is hook up with a company called PCS, Patient Communication Simulators. And they have a product called Spark. It used to be called Alex. And it's an avatar AI language engine based product where you practice patient interviews with scripted avatar based patients in a variety of settings. And you have a lot of control over the script as well. Pardon, let me turn the timer off. So the thinking was that these volunteer students who were running the clinic weren't getting any training. And so we decided that some virtual practice with avatars for patient intake was going to help to create some better confidence in the space and better outcomes for the patients. So what we designed in this grant pitch was actually a phased, sort of scaffolded integration of an Oculus Go headset into some training for these students. So imagine that the first batch of training is a PowerPoint slide deck, possibly interactive. Maybe you even have embedded audio recordings on there. And then that's phase 1 of their training. Phase 2 of their training, they'd sign up for a lab time. They'd come in and they'd get time in the Oculus Go interviewing patients that we had scripted to mimic C.D. Doyle patients. And then as a follow-up, round 3 to that training, we have in our medical school a program called Standardized Patients, where you hire actors to come in and act out cases to be the patients. And they act these things out in clinical rooms, mock clinic rooms that we have in our health learning building. So we would hire standardized patients to go to the C.D. Doyle clinic and have a boot camp training day with the volunteers as a phase 3 of the training. So really you'd have the headset as a second step of the training, something that was repeatable once they left the lab. They could log on to a portal and do a desktop version of the immersive reality. That's a non-headset version. So that's the, when we have been thinking about now, of course, that was just about to launch for spring of 2020. Late 2019 is when we scored that grant. So the clinic itself was shut down for COVID. The grant itself and VR applications in the med ed space have shut down till about this week. Actually, later this afternoon, I'm going to go in and do our very first pilot with the Oculus Rift and a clean box, UV sanitizer, to see if we can't get an emergency room simulation up and on its feet as a volunteer activity for some students. But we had shut down all of this clinic activity. So this poor effort got shut down, and instead simulation was sort of thrust into the forefront of any training situation through 2020. So we've really needed to keep our language clear in the medical school space about how we're using simulation now as a Band-Aid or as a fill-in, but how do we move forward with it as a scaffolded activity when we have standardized patients, right, that we lean on in a program, right? I don't want to absolutely remove standardized patients with avatars. And in a similar anatomy space, we were really on the cusp of, we have a cadaver lab, and we have 6 cadavers in the lab about half the year. And this, of course, all of that learning changed this year. And we were also just on the cusp of having the VH, a virtual human dissector. VH dissector is a product that just recently made the jump into the VR space. So we were just at this moment where we were incorporating the VR headset in anatomy instruction in the partner lab next to the cadaver lab. And it was, and then that it sort of disappeared, and even the contract for the VR virtual human disappeared for the year, and we pivoted in a new direction. So we totally left that product behind. So that's how we think about it as a scaffolded activity, not a replacement. And so we were just breaking through into some of that space, and even trying to create research and efficacy, not just on headset experience, but impact on learners, memory impact on the learning, like I said, building confidence as well, and then increasing and improving patient outcomes. So if anybody's got some questions about that, but this is all we think about our stuff on Oculus in particular, because that's where all our apps seem to be. I could expand a little bit, how we're, or I could share some surveys. Oxford Medical Simulation is a product in particular that we've used that I think is one of the more robust, and it's an emergency room simulation.
Yeah, if you put a link to that, Mary, that would be good.
Yeah,
I think that would be good
totally.
for people to see, because I don't think I grabbed that when we were talking.
Yeah.
Before.
Totally. Yeah. So Oxford Medical Simulation, it's a fully immersive Oculus Rift-esque experience in this 360 emergency room. And you've got 15 minutes to stabilize a patient and get them moving in a better direction. There's a nurse you communicate with, there's orders you can get through a computer. And there's, once again, a desktop option of it that students use through the course of 2020. But we're trying to pivot back into the headset experience if we can.
I think that you're bringing up something that I think is going to be really important for this paper that we're putting together for the VP of Research to kind of call this. Is like, if any of you are working in this space and you have something like Justin, you're sharing some slides, Mary, this whole story we've been talking about, I think super important. I think we want to be able to highlight some of the projects in XR research and projects that are happening in XR across campus, so that as we lay out people's interest in use and current behavior, we can help tell that story.
So you also mentioned patient communication systems. Is that what it's called?
They're called PCS, patient communication simulators.
Simulator.
Spark is the name of the product. Like I said, I'll get the link up in here. I'm
Okay.
slower when I'm up on the iPad. It's once again, like I said, it's more of a language engine. It's not, you're not really, and even Oxford Medical Simulation, you are not really practicing procedures on a patient that require hands. Maybe if you're listening to lung sounds, there'll be a pre-recorded lung sound in the Oxford Medical Simulation, and you might get a little of that in Patient Communication Simulator, but Patient Communication Simulator is really about practicing the intake, practicing how you have difficult conversations, or how you talk to maybe a stressed patient, or how you talk about, like I said, people, different resistant conversations, sexual history, vaccination, acceptance, things like that. But PCS, Patient Communication Simulators.
Right.
And once again, COVID being a big push to, you'll see more COVID patients written into avatars now, as well. But PCS Spark, I'll get some links shared up in here.
All right, Erin, I think we only have a few more minutes left.
Yeah, we are. And I have to give a speech at 11 o'clock. So I'm going to probably jump off faster than most of you. But I do think that we've got some notes. And if you don't feel like your voice was heard, or you have additional things you want to add, please just take a few moments to add some additional things in the Google Doc. So that way Porter and all of us can kind of capture it, and we can kind of share a summary back to you guys. Also, if you want to continue the conversation, make sure that your name is up on the participant list at the top. Because I think we're getting to the point where instead of reaching out to the whole XR Alliance, which has a lot of interests, we're thinking about kind of a smaller research groups that can go forward in this hub of extended reality to start thinking about, are there possible grants, or are there projects where we can have different disciplines working together? Or do we go after something larger on mental models to kind of support multiple things in this space? Does that sound good, everybody? Okay, great. I have to go to give a speech, but thank you so much, and I'll let Paul end. And I don't think it ends if I leave, but we'll.
You probably have to assign me to it.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Let me sign you to it really quick, just in case people.
When you leave, it'll say, "Do you want to assign this to somebody?"
Okay, I've changed it to you, Paul. So you're in charge now.
I'm now the host with the most.
Bye, everyone.
And bye. Thank you. Okay. I don't want to spend much more time unless you guys do. But I think this is a good beginning. I don't know. we got to question 1.5, I think. But we got some interesting responses along the way. We do have Anna's here, and she's willing to put you on. We have a website, the xra.utexas.edu. You can become a member of that. Then you become a member of the group list, so we can send out groups. And we have a Slack channel, and in fact, we can start maybe making groups within the Slack channel as well. And so we're just at the beginning of this thing. We want to get this organized and up and running. We want to eventually make this into a research interest group that's under the VPR's office, so that we can get a little bit of support and not a lot, but enough to help us maybe further collaborate together to obtain projects and grants and all that kind of stuff. Does anybody have anything else they would like to add at this time?
Can I just double back to the chat, that Hanger Clinic link that I put in there? That was actually, in 2019, the South by for 2019, we did a couple like showcases at the medical school. And we had there is a 2019, maybe even recording from South by from them. But that was just sort of a callback to the conversation that you were having earlier about amputees. So Hanger is a rehab clinic with tons of locations. And this Migo is a product that they were developing a little while back. So that's just a callback to the other thing I put in the chat.
All right, cool. All righty. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you much. This was very interesting. Hopefully we'll continue discussions in the future. You take care now, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.